Gospel of John, chapter 2. The fourth of the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. John is in a whole different kind of language. It does a lot of images. John uses Cana, as I was saying, and the only place that Cana appears in the Gospel of John is in chapters 2, 3, and 4. So there's this neat, if you read into these verses, there's this neat bookends kind of thing. A lot of times in Scripture, if you're reading along and you see what seems to be same reference, a lot of times the biblical writers would bookend important ideas. So there's something significant in this section of 2, 3, and 4 of what Jesus is doing related to Cana of Galilee. And Cana is a place that nobody would expect anything. I mean, it wasn't the capital, it wasn't the hot spot. It was, just an ordinary town. And this is how it goes, beginning with chapter 2, verse 1. 3 days later, there was a wedding at Cana in Galilee, and Mary, the mother of Jesus, was there. Jesus and his disciples had likewise been invited to the celebration. At a certain point, the wine ran out, and Jesus' mother told him, "They have no wine." Jesus replied, "Mother, what does that have to do with me? My hour has not yet come." So she instructed those waiting on tables, "Do whatever he tells you." As prescribed for Jewish ceremonial washings, there were 6 stone water jars on hand, each one holding between 15 and 25 gallons. "Fill those jars with water," Jesus said, and the servers filled them to the brim. "Now," Jesus said, "draw some out and take it to the caterer." They did as they were instructed. The caterer tasted the water, which had been turned into wine, without knowing where it had come from. The only ones who knew were those who were waiting on tables, since they had drawn the water. The caterer called the bride and groom over and remarked, "People usually serve the best wine first, then when the guests have been drinking a while, a lesser vintage is served. What you've done is to keep the best wine until now." Jesus performed this first of his signs at Cana in Galilee. In this way he revealed his glory, and the disciples believed in him. After this, Jesus went down to Capernaum with his mother, brother, and sisters, and disciples, and they stayed there a few days. So what were, if anybody's willing to, what were some of the most embarrassing things? Anybody willing to share a most embarrassing moment?
I was in the middle of preaching, and I had to go to the bathroom really bad, so I had to stop and say, because we are made human, because God created us this way, I have to go to the bathroom. So I left in the middle of my sermon. That was embarrassing.
Okay. Anybody else willing to share their embarrassing or a embarrassing story?
I'm terrified of falling. A man went bouldering, which is like 5 feet off the ground. And I made it almost to the thing, right? And then all of a sudden I couldn't reach the next one, and I panicked, and I couldn't get down, and I was clinging to the wall. And then I got on the ground and I cried a lot, and everyone saw it. It's great. When I was about 7, I thought I was cold because I could jump off the side of the pool backwards. And my mom was there with me, and I was like, "Hey, Mom, look what I can do." And she's like, "No, don't do that." But I did it anyways because I was 7, and I smacked my face on the pool, and I got 7 stitches, I think. And so my mom took me to the hospital, and she's like, "You want to know the reason why I told you not to do that?" And I was like, "Why?" And she's like, "Because when I was 7, I did the exact same thing. I was told not to do it, but I did it anyways, and you have the same exact amount of stitches too."
I shared my embarrassing story right here at ThreeHouse, right after we put the new drinking fountain in. We were standing, several of us were standing around talking back around it. And apparently I was a little closer and leaned more into the fountain, not noticing it until I felt my butt being wet, where I had leaned into it enough to turn the drinking fountain on, and it was just pouring right into the back. So it's really hard when everybody's around talking, not saying anything, noticing, waiting for me to, so and you can't hide that, so that's embarrassing. Well, imagine the embarrassment to this family of this wedding when they've run out of wine. This is not like a luxury where you've got an open bar kind of wine. You could get by with that. You know where you can go to the bar now in our culture. But in this culture, and in this time, and in this situation, it was, instead of going on a honeymoon, folks that got married they would have a 7-day wedding celebration. So to run out of wine was to lose face, was to insult the guests that were there. So this was embarrassing in a big way, on the edge of, it could have been a crisis. It could have been a really bad situation. What were some of the greatest parties you've ever been to?
Yeah, over Christmas, this sounds like not a great party at all, but it was really awesome. My brother's the best man in a wedding, and so his best friend hosted his bachelor party, and I was one of 4 other people invited. There's just guys, and you get there, and I was expecting sorry, this is what I was expecting, knowing this guy, strippers, and that's what I was expecting, and no, it was, let's play D&D for 10 hours. So, that's what we did. It was awesome.
Okay. What are some of the other great parties?
But one of the best parties I've ever been to was the surprise party that we had for David.
Oh, yeah.
I've never seen Dave so speechless. He just was so flustered. He kept walking back and forth and wait, what? It was fantastic. There were people here, and then once he thought that he knew, was all caught up, then he'd go around the corner and there'd be somebody else there that he didn't expect to be there, and he'd be just speechless. It was entertaining.
I was so surprised I didn't even have tears. I was into the no words. That was unbelievable. Well, this was a great party. This John 2 party, this is a celebration for everybody. And Mary, what do we remember about Mary? Mary is the mother of Jesus. And in a lot of the Gospels, she doesn't play a huge, prominent role except as the mother of Jesus, kind of in a supporting, invisible role. But I want to suggest in this scripture, there's a couple things for us to point to. And by the way, this is the scripture that I'm using to think a lot about ministry here at ThreeHouse, ministry in general, the situation that we're at. This is the scripture that I'm living with this semester. So I'm not going to preach about it every week. We're not going to read it every week. But I think that there's something tremendously important for us tonight and to think about all semester in this story. One of them is that Mary, if you remember when she was born in the Gospel of Luke, she had a very powerful statement about what God was going to do for her, through her. And it was going to upend the powerful. She was going to serve as a way of changing the world. And so here we're at this wedding. They run out of wine. That's bad enough. And then, as only a mother can do sometimes, she turns to Jesus and says, hey, they're out of wine. She knew what Jesus was capable of. And just said to him, they don't have any wine. They're out of wine. And he says, Jesus says, wait a minute, what? It's not my time now. So I'm not sure if Mary was urging Jesus to step up, inviting Jesus to step into the possibility, knowing what he could do. I don't know if you've ever had somebody say to you the equivalent of they're out of wine. There's something that you could do. Here's an invitation. I'd like to invite you to think about doing this. I wonder if you're called to do something. Maybe there's an opportunity that you want to think about. So sometimes there are nudges that speak to us. And I think Mary shows us just in the form of what she said to Jesus. They're out of wine. And he says, wait, it's not my time. What is it to me? And then what Mary does is in the confidence that Jesus was going to do something, just kind of nonchalantly or very knowingly saying to the servers, do whatever he tells you. Whatever he tells you to do. So then Jesus steps up, tells them to fill the 6 stone jars, huge jars, each holding 20 to 30 gallons. Fill them with water, take them to the host, have him sample it. We know that the story goes that they did that. And I don't know if you've tried carrying 20 to 30 gallons of water in a big jar. That would have been a struggle by itself, but they got it there. And these are jars that people would use to wash so that they could go to the temple. This is the jars, or they're not ritual jars that are kept clean and covered until that time in worship. These are what people would use to wash up so that they could be at worship. So these are for the ritual purifications. So they take these, and the water has turned into wine somewhere along the line. And the server says to the bridegroom or the hosts, everybody else serves the best wine first, but you have saved the best until now. I find this scripture hopeful and challenging. And I wonder what it might do, what it might say for us. What does it say to you? Here's what I find hopeful. The best in here could be still in front of us. We're looking as a ThreeHouse community at a new semester. Have we thought we've had the best wine already? Have we had great experiences? Do we feel like we're just putting in time? A lot of people have graduated. We look around here and there aren't as many people at worship tonight as there have been some other weeks or semesters. Does that mean that we've run out of wine? In our finances, the United Methodist Annual Conference is proposing for the year 2020 reducing the amount of funding that they give to campus ministry significantly, so that if we had to rely only on that, we wouldn't be able to stay in ministry. So we're going to have to do fundraising more. We're going to have to think about ministry in new ways. I'm going to have to, work differently than I have before. So it's a little bit challenging. And yet, in this moment, when they had reached that crisis point of being almost out of wine, Mary says to the server, just do whatever he tells you. And what he told them to do was very ordinary. Fill these working tool jars with water and take it to the steward. So there are moments, I think, in our lives where we might feel like we've run out of wine at a wedding. We have nothing left. We're exhausted, we're overwhelmed, we're troubled, we're frightened, we don't know what we're doing, we don't know where we're going, nothing is good. You know, there are a lot of ways that we might feel like we've run out of wine. And yet in this story, we see that Jesus, acting as a part of God, brought new life. And as one of our tenets of our faith that we believe, we're identifying, some of us have been working on articulating values that we believe, and one of them is faith, and we believe in God, and that we believe that God works even in those moments that we are most frightened of, despairing of, and produces new wine. I find it interesting in this scripture also that this happens on the third day. Right at the beginning of it, it says on the third day. So where does that come from? In John, right before this, there are 2 other days mentioned, so it might be the third day. It might also be an early reference to what Jesus did after he was killed and put in the tomb and rose on the third day. This could be another foreshadowing story that tells us that Jesus, God, produces new life even when we least imagine it. So I'm looking for signs of new life. Abraham Joshua Heschel was a rabbi who was involved in the civil rights movement in the 60s. And he tells I'm not sure if he's still alive or not, if he is, he's really old. He wrote really great stories, and he had a keen sense of humor and observation. And he made the observation that people of our time are losing the power of celebrating. Another writer says, Christ turned water into wine, but the church has succeeded in doing something even more difficult. It has turned wine back into water. So I think that there might be an invitation in here to see that so that as people of faith, we might learn how to celebrate this new beginning, this new life. So it's great to laugh. COVID is great to laugh. It's fun. It's great to celebrate. So I'm curious, what can we think about? How can we live as people who believe that God brings new wine at just the right time? How can we celebrate that? That would be a thing to think about. I'm inviting you to think about. So think about ways that we could celebrate this semester. And how can we take that celebrating and share that with others so that others might participate? Because I think other people get to the point where they've run out of wine and they've tipped the bottle over and given up. Sometimes people turn to wine to numb their feelings. Sometimes we use other things. We use self-doubt to numb our feelings. Sometimes we use loneliness. We use all kinds of feelings, or we do all kinds of things to not notice that we're at that point where we want somebody to say, do whatever he says, and brings new wine when we've run out of wine. So let's, hopefully this semester, let's look for ways that we can celebrate. Let's look for ways that we can introduce celebrating as part of our worship and our serving. Let's look for ways that we can see signs that God is doing a new thing among us. Because we believe here, and we try to live in a way that God loves each of us, that God has created each of you just like you are, and that is a wonderful gift. You are each God's work of art, just as you are.